Well, it's quite interesting that we're doing this here in the Conesville Methodist Church. I realized that my genesis has some roots here, actually. At the time, my mother attended here for, I guess, basically her whole life. And the Methodists would switch their pastors' districts around so that at the time my mother attended, my father attended the Blenheim Methodist Church, but they were served by the same pastor in the late 1940s, middle 1940s, George Moody. And I remember that my dad had met my mother at some interconnected church functions, maybe a youth group or something, and he followed a very proper decorum at the time. He asked George Moody to ask my mother's father, Freeland Case, if he might get to know her better. So one day, after the service here, Mr. Moody asked my grandfather Freeland if it would be all right if Basil Sutton could visit and get to know my mother Ruth. And so it was with my grandfather's blessing that he did. Now my dad was a little bit older than my mom, 17 years, not uncommon in the historical settings if we look back. But in spite of that, that did not seem to be an issue. And so my dad and mom, well, first I'll say this. My dad proposed to my mom down on the porch of the Backstriker homestead by the river down there. She was babysitting for Vi and Wally and must be somehow down there too. And then on June 16th, 1948, Pastor Moody married my dad and mom right here in the church, and I was born the following year, May 16th, 1949. My first home was in North Blenheim, where my dad and his brother and my grandfather rented the Everett Mattice farm. Everett Mattice at the time was Schoharie County supervisor, if I understand right, and he just didn't feel he could do a good job of being both county supervisor and farming it. So my grandfather Ernest rented it with my dad and my Uncle Gerald, and so my first residence was that house that still survives. I don't know how. It's at a lower elevation, right below the Blenheim Bridge on the left, and I have a few memories from there. But I mostly remember Conesville because I frequently visited my grandparents. Stayed over for the weekend sometimes. Of course, I had to get back for school. Stayed over summer times. And every Sunday after church, not every Sunday, probably once a month, we came here to my grandparents and went to my grandparents Sutton and Jefferson one Sunday a month.